excuse my notes, but I want to make sure that I don't go off topic. I have a tendency. When Orville mentioned that we were talking this week about how Jesus will use a meal to teach us and show us who he is, this memory came back to me. And it was about 7 or 8 years ago. And my way of participating in the life and the work of the church was volunteering with the worship committee. And I oversaw the preparation of the elements and the servers and tapped people on the shoulders and asked them to do things that they maybe didn't feel too comfortable about, but they did it anyways. So this particular communion service was a really, really crummy, dark, rainy February morning. Really, really bleak outside. And as the gathering service began, the band was playing, the sanctuary was filling up. And about 15 minutes into it, I was sitting about the second pew back, and Tim Tufford, who was singing in the band, walked over to me. He just whispered in my ear, "Tori, where are the elements?" I said, "They're right there." Goes, "No, they're not." And I just felt all the blood drain out of me. I thought, no way. No way. I hadn't noticed when I walked past the kitchen that there wasn't breadcrumbs everywhere and baskets. It just was not in my head. I hadn't noticed it. My heart sank. I'd obviously missed the message from one of the volunteers that was, in fact, doing it that day, or I thought was doing it that day. So I'd messed up, and I didn't get that. Clearly, I didn't know what I was doing. This just begins to feed in your head or my head all the things that we know we're no good at. And from there on, I was on a free fall because I took off out the back of this church in the pouring sideways. Did I mention the rain was coming? Sideways. It was awful. I ran all the way around the back of the church, got in my car, drove to No Frills, flew into No Frills like a mad woman, grabbing the first loaf of bread and the bottle of Welch's I could find, and came flying back in here. Paul, I think you were involved because I'm sure it was you and Tim had the communion table was still neatly stored in the narthex where it always was until it was communion time. And there was a cloth, and Tim had the goblets, and we're chopping bread and putting it in the basket, and Katie's beginning to introduce the communion prayers in preparation to receive. And I am wearing a wool sweater that I knit. Began 4 times too big for me. Now it's a full-length wool dress, soaked to the skin. My hair is hanging. I've got mascara running down my face. I look an absolute wreck. And I've spent the last 15 minutes giving myself a sound beating over this. I was so angry with myself that I'd missed all of it, apparently. And we all know we've got the buttons we can hit. Nobody else needs to tell you how you can mess up because we know with great familiarity where those buttons are. And I'm all too familiar with them, reminding myself that, what did I think I was doing, organizing anything? I haven't got the skill set. I haven't got the brains, apparently, and I certainly wasn't paying attention. So all this is going through my head. And I realized that I also was supposed to be serving communion. So I'm paper towel from the bathroom trying to dry off. And as I'm walking up the side, Katie announced communion was being served, and Tim, God love him, pushed the communion table up the center from the really dark area at the back to come up here, and we served communion. And I remember standing there, and I'm just shaking. All I can hear is my heart pounding in my ears. And I saw Orville was going around serving to people who were not able. It was too much of a struggle to get up to receive, so he was going about offering. But there was a woman sitting in about the 3rd or 4th pew who struggled with her mobility, and but she was determined she was getting up to receive communion. She was going to walk up herself. And so as I stood here holding the goblet, shaking, head pounding, and I watched this woman and the struggle that she was having, but the determination that she was on her own going to make her way to the Lord's table. I could feel the tears rattling around the back of my head, and I felt this hand, and I actually thought it was Orville standing behind me because I'm sure he could see me bouncing, but it wasn't. He was still wandering around, but I felt this lovely, warm hand on the back of my head steadying me. calming me and caring for me. And everybody received the communion, and as I was tidying up, I had two men who I'd never met before come up and say that they just couldn't get over how impactful it was to see the communion table come out of the darkness on such a dreary day into the light at the front. What a great idea that was. And I just want to make sure I've got here. It was at that point, Orville did come up behind me and put his hands in the back of my shoulders. And I realized that he had seen, of course, what it was supposed to look like and what, in fact, it did look like. It didn't look anything like it was supposed to. But he did just stand there, sort of okay, Tori, settle down now. You can't spring out of here. And I tidied up. And as I was in the back, cleaning up, washing the goblets, I realized that all my efforts to make this be right, to make this be what everybody would have expected it to be, were for my benefit, because I could have run to the kitchen and grabbed the first bag of crackers and a juice box from the fridge, and we would have celebrated communion. And I didn't need to do any of that, but it was for my benefit. It was all for me to understand that Jesus' hand was steadying me and reminding me of whose food I was serving and what purpose it was here for. Mm-hmm. It wasn't my meal. It was his. I believed that Jesus was showing me great compassion and thanking me for my efforts, even though it looked like an old Three Stooges episode. To me, nobody else here noticed. Unless you did, and I'm really sorry, but thank you for being here. And I'm sorry, Paula and Tim, I don't know if that makes you one of the Stooges, but it could quite. I believe it was Jesus teaching me that he is capable of using us in all that we do in his name for his glory and his purposes. And I do actually believe that our messes are his speciality. And it was one of those, as I was writing this or thinking about it, I thought it'll probably talk anybody out of ever volunteering, and that's not actually what I want to do, because I have actually used this example to people who I have asked to step up and try something different, because for me, when you do that, you get to stand that little bit closer because you're exposed, and that is when he's going to show up, when we don't know what we think we don't know what we're doing. And he will show up. And it was very, very powerful. Thank you.